Armenian Genocide, a brief overview for high school students. This video is made possible by the California Department of Education as part of the Content, Literacy, Inquiry, and Citizenship Project, which provides professional learning and resources to help educators and school administrators successfully implement California's History Social Science Framework. This video was developed in partnership with the Sacramento County Office of Education and the Genocide Education Project. Please be aware that this video deals with a sensitive topic. Accounts of violence against groups and individuals will be discussed and graphic images will be included. The intended audience for this video is high school students and their educators. Viewer discretion is advised. The most respectful and scholarly materials were consulted in the development of this video. The video is not intended to provide a complete account of genocide, but rather serve as a place to begin a larger conversation about the topic. Welcome to this brief overview of the Armenian Genocide. I'm Roxanne Makashjan from the Genocide Education Project. Today I'll talk to you about what genocide means and tell you about the Armenian Genocide. You'll also hear from a grandchild of a survivor of the Armenian Genocide. When you think of the word genocide, what comes to mind? Often people think of the Holocaust in World War II. While this is probably the most well-known example of genocide, it is far from the only one. And those that come before and after it carry important lessons we can learn from. Genocide is truly and unfortunately a worldwide phenomenon. In fact, genocide has happened on every continent except Antarctica. The word genocide is made up of the Greek prefix genos, meaning race or tribe, and the Latin suffix -cide, which means killing. Genocide is an internationally recognized crime. Acts of genocide are committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The definition of genocide was created by Raphael Lemkin, a Polish Jewish lawyer who lost 49 relatives to the Holocaust. And he fought tirelessly to have the term adopted by the United Nations. As shown here, the Convention for the Prevention of Genocide was signed during a ceremony at the UN in 1948. There are 5 categories of ways genocide is committed, according to the United Nations. 1. Killing members of the group. 2. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. 3. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part. 4. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And 5. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. To sum up, if there is intent to destroy a specific group of people using any of these ways listed, then a genocide has been committed. It's important to study the history of a region in order to fully understand complex events like genocide. The process towards genocide begins when a group in a society is targeted for being different and stripped of their equal rights. This process often continues with efforts to separate the group from the rest of society, as happened in Nazi concentration camps in World War II. One concentration and extermination camp, Auschwitz, is pictured here, with its barbed wire fences and buildings. Before the Holocaust, the Armenian Genocide was carried out in the western part of historical Armenia, in present-day Turkey. It is often referred to as the first modern-era genocide, and can be taught as a model or a prototype for a new era of human rights abuses. Before we go deeper into the history of the Armenian Genocide, you may be asking yourself, where is Armenia? Armenians are indigenous to the lands now in eastern Turkey and somewhat further east towards Russia. At one time, the Armenian kingdom spanned the entire region between the Mediterranean, Black, and Caspian Seas, north of Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Present-day Armenia, bordered by Turkey, Iran, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, is the only part of historic Armenia not under Turkish rule during World War I, and where Armenians survived. Historical Armenia was part of the Ottoman Empire, and it was located in the eastern part of Turkey. As shown in this map, today's Armenia is located east of Turkey, surrounded by Iran, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. One example of the horrors of the Armenian genocide can be found in this image of human remains in a village near the city of Mush. Turkish forces plundered Mush and many Armenian villages in the area, killing inhabitants and setting fire to the towns. Only 12 people in this village survived. Why was it considered the first modern-era genocide? It's because new tools and methods of the Industrial Revolution, like the telegraph and railroad, made mass killing possible on a much greater scale and with much more speed and efficiency. Shown in this photo from 1915, Armenian genocide victims were deported on the Baghdad Railroad. The victims of the Armenian genocide were the Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire. Greeks and Assyrians were also targets of the perpetrators. The perpetrators were the Ottoman Turks, and the genocide was systematically planned by the Ottoman Turkish leadership. The victims were treated as second-class citizens of the Ottoman Empire because of the deep discrimination against non-Turks. As the empire began losing lands after numerous wars, Ottoman leaders adopted an extreme nationalistic ideology, seeking to eliminate non-Turks and acquire their wealth. Armenians, the largest non-Turkish group in the empire, became the prime targets of violence. To get a better understanding of how the Armenian genocide affected individuals, let's hear from a granddaughter of a survivor, Sarah Cohan. She'll share her family's experience, and later in the video, she'll talk about how the Armenian genocide impacts her life today.
My name is Sarah Cohan. I am of Armenian and Jewish heritage. On my Armenian side, my grandfather is a survivor, and his family was from a small town called Talis, which is outside of a larger area called Konya. But in the spring of 1915, all the men of the village were arrested, all the Armenian men were arrested and detained, and I actually have a photograph of all the men in the village before they were executed. And that image includes a picture of my great-grandfather. This is when the Ottoman Turkish government had issued orders to all the provinces to round up and either execute Armenian men of working age or put them in work battalions, which would generally ended in death.
Let's take a closer look at what happened. The Ottoman Empire perpetrated the Armenian genocide mainly between 1915 and 1918. It's considered by historians as the greatest human rights crisis of World War I. Beginning on April 24, 1915, the Ottoman Turkish government arrested several hundred prominent Armenian men in the capital, Constantinople. They publicly executed some of them and took others to the countryside, killed them, or forced them into work battalions where most died. The ruling party ordered all governors and mayors to round up Armenians and send them into the desert with only the provisions they could carry, as shown in these images. Turkish officials told Armenians the deportation was only temporary and for their own safety during the war. During these forced marches, the Armenians were killed in gruesome ways. Many were physically violated, stripped, robbed, and massacred. Women were often sexually assaulted and forced to marry Turks. Many children were abducted and then forced to take Turkish identities. The majority of the victims died of starvation and exposure. In the end, 1.5 million Armenians, more than half of the entire Armenian population living on its historic homeland, were killed, and their personal and community properties, such as their schools, hospitals, churches, were stolen by the government, transferred to Ottoman Turks, or destroyed. As a result of the Armenian genocide, a 3,000-year-old civilization virtually ceased to exist. After the genocide, there was a short-lived attempt at justice. Under pressure from the European nations, the Turkish government held trials against some of the genocide perpetrators. But the cases were mostly abandoned, with most of the criminal masterminds having already fled the country, unpunished. Meanwhile, a group of Turks, including many of the genocide's perpetrators, took control of the government. The few Armenian survivors who had escaped death were forced to find refuge wherever they could, dispersed across the globe. Turkey's new leader, Mustafa Kemal, who was called Ataturk, meaning father of the Turks, continued genocidal acts against the Greeks and Assyrians still living within Turkey's borders. Under his leadership, Turkey became a republic and refused to take responsibility for the genocides committed. As shown in this image, Ataturk served as the supreme military commander in the Turkish military. The United Nations, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, and many governments and historical institutions recognize the Armenian genocide. But the Turkish government denies a genocide was committed against the Armenians of the Ottoman Empire. During that same time frame, Armenians who were still alive persevered. In 1918, Armenians living in the small piece of their homeland that was just outside Turkish control but under Russian control declared independence. As shown in this image, volunteer Armenian soldiers defended the Armenian border from Turkish plans to further annihilate Armenians and take over that region. But that independence only lasted 2 years. The small Armenian Republic was overtaken by the newly established Soviet Union. But in 1990, as the Soviet Union declined, Armenia again declared its independence. The Turks have conducted a massive campaign to prevent the world from knowing about the genocide and to discredit scholarly and political efforts to address it. In recent decades, those who have written or taught about this genocide have been intimidated, imprisoned, and even assassinated. Pictured is Hrant Dink, an editor of an Armenian newspaper in Turkey. After publishing articles on Armenian issues, he was considered an enemy of the state and assassinated in 2007. Even today, Armenians are still targets of hate and are under threat of genocidal actions. Because of that constant threat, Armenians are doing everything they can to ensure that their country, culture, and history survive. Shown here, Armenian Americans protest Turkey's denial of the Armenian genocide during the commemoration of the 100th anniversary in 2015. Let's return to Sarah to hear about how the Armenian genocide and its denial impacts her life today. Pictured here are the remaining members of Sarah's family in 1919.
You would think that as a third-generation survivor, which is what I'm considered as a grandchild, that there would be little impact on my life regarding the denial or an event that happened 106 years ago. For most of my life, actually going to the village that my family is from has been impossible, literally impossible. Someone of Armenian descent, for again most of my adult life, was that we were not allowed to go into Turkey, and eventually that changed, but it was still a really difficult task if you had published in the field, and so it keeps me away from having a deeper understanding of where my family is from. To be 106 years later and still not allowed back to see this land is really, takes a tremendous impact. And at that point, I really took, I kind of really started thinking about how I could become an activist and how I could use the skill set of teaching to try to make a difference, not just with the denial of the Armenian genocide, but also with human rights issues and around me. I felt like, if this denial impacted me so strongly, then those who were dealing with injustices occurring at this moment, how they must feel. And I went from teaching history to working with nonprofit groups that focused on human and civil rights. So as we know, it seems to happen again and again. And so it doesn't, but with that said, we haven't done enough as a people to create proper institutions from stopping genocide from happening. We need better organizations to monitor situations to know if there's potential of genocide. We need rapid response systems, and we need international courts and tribunals. And so for a student, there is so much work to be done, and it doesn't have to be the moment of conflict. That I would say, think about not only your own situation, your own histories, but what's happening currently, and find ways of contributing to creating a more just system, a system that not just in our country, but internationally, that will safeguard human rights.
After learning about the Armenian genocide, let's think about how genocide still plagues societies around the globe. What are the short-term and long-term consequences for individuals and groups who do not have equal rights under the government of their country of residence? What is the responsibility of countries to intercede in stopping mass violence in other areas around the world? What is the responsibility of individuals to intervene on behalf of people facing danger within and outside of their own countries? While this was a brief account of a very complex set of circumstances in history, it's important to understand that the unjust use of power and use of violence to achieve one's goals should never be tolerated. As individuals, we have an obligation to call out injustice when we see it. And as a group, we must find ways of preventing genocides from ever happening. On behalf of the Genocide Education Project, we were happy to contribute our expertise to the development of this important video. The citations for the images used in this video can be found on the California History Social Science website, located at californiahss.org. There you can also find more resources on this and other genocides around the world. Technical production of this video was performed by the Sacramento County Office of Education's Internet and Media Services Department.